I used to think staying quiet was the key to a peaceful relationship. You know those moments when you're trying to connect, but it feels like you're invisible? I'd sit there, watching him scroll through his phone, my words hanging in the air.
Is he emotionally unavailable? And what can you do about it? Well, for a start, don't bottle things up. Let him know that you would like to feel more connected to him. You've been feeling emotionally neglected for some time, or maybe for a long time. By waiting to speak, you're literally turning yourself into a victim and him into a persecutor. You've tried staying quiet to avoid conflict, but silence hasn't brought you peace. It's only made the emotional gap wider. You've tried speaking up only to end in shouting, defensiveness, or a wall of blame. But there's a third option. Stay with me as I share the story of my client, Angela. Her experience brings this third option to life far more powerfully than any theoretical explanation.
For a long time, I was terrified of confronting him. Terrified that if I voiced how I felt, he'd become defensive, angry, or worse, he'd leave. But in holding back my truth, I wasn't preserving peace. I was preserving distance. Then something shifted inside me. It wasn't dramatic or explosive, just a quiet realization. I couldn't live my life in the shadow of silence, hoping that peace would come from never speaking my truth. So I took a breath, and gently, clearly, I spoke. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I simply shared my feelings, how disconnected I felt when his attention drifted, how much it hurt when my attempts to reach him went unnoticed. My voice didn't tremble. It was steady, calm, anchored in the certainty of my own worth. In couple therapy, I had learned that how I say something often matters more than the words themselves. This time, I didn't wait until I was hurt and overwhelmed. I was able to speak from a grounded place, soft, steady, honest. And as I did that, I noticed something unexpected. He didn't shut down or turn away. He stayed present. He stayed open. And in that moment, I realized I was going somewhere. This wasn't just about being heard. It was about building something new between us. I've started leaving my truth with him gently, like an offering, not to get my way, but to protect the space between us. And for the first time in a long time, he listened, truly listened. There was a quietness between us, different than before. No longer a silent chasm, but an attentive, reflective space. In that moment, the power shifted, not because I fought or demanded, but because I valued myself enough to speak honestly without fear. It wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't even about his reaction. It was about reclaiming my voice, my space, my presence in our shared life. In couple therapy, I had learned that relationships aren't just about two people. They're about the emotional atmosphere we create together. And that night, by speaking gently yet firmly, I finally understood what that really meant. I didn't just speak. I shifted the entire tone between us. Something changed that evening. Maybe in him, maybe not, but certainly within me. Because I finally spoke, not out of fear, not out of resentment, but from a quiet, powerful place of knowing, I matter. And knowing this deeply and completely made all the difference.
Because she understood the silence was erasing her, not protecting her. Because she started speaking, not to win, but to connect. Because she spoke from calm, not crisis. Because she released the fantasy, the things will fix themselves if she stayed quiet. Because her worthiness no longer required his validation to exist. Because her courage finally outgrew her terror of abandonment. Because she realized her softness was strength, not surrender. Because she trusted her feminine energy wasn't weakness. It was the bridge that invited his love back in. Because she stopped keeping score and started keeping faith in him and in herself. Because she no longer measured love by who gives more, but by how love is received and returned with presence, because she released the story that he didn't care and embraced the possibility that his love looked different, because she stopped comparing who tried harder, because she stopped waiting to feel overwhelmed before speaking her truth, because she trusted that love freely given returns multiplied,
and started trusting that love thrives
when it's not weighed
or demanded.
because she recognized her worth wasn't measured in his reaction, because she started living her truth like an offering, not a demand, because she no longer needed him to change before she spoke differently, because she realized love thrives in freedom, not fear, because she trusted that love freely given returns multiplied, because she became the change that shifted the whole emotional climate. Because she realized that softness was strength, not surrender. Because she released the fantasy that things would fix themselves if she stayed quiet. Because her worthiness no longer required his validation to exist. Because she stopped keeping score and started keeping faith in him and in herself. Because she no longer measured love by who gives more, but by how love is received and returned with presence. Because she let go of the story that he didn't care. Because she became the change that shifted the whole emotional climate.